all movies, horror or otherwise, can be stone-cold masterpieces. The vast majority of films, in fact, fall short of this, with most sitting in the decent/watchable/fine/okay region that we generally call average. But it's undeniably frustrating when a film gets so many things right, yet ends up falling short of greatness for some reason. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for What Culture, and these are 10 recent horror movies that were almost amazing. Number 10, Heart Eyes. Heart Eyes is nothing if not one of the most unique horror films of the past few years. A bold attempt to wrap conventional slasher tropes around a charming rom-com formula. And honestly, for most of the movie, it actually works. Leads Olivia Holt and Mason Gooding are an effortlessly shippable pair. The kills are appreciably nasty, and the Heart Eyes killer themselves has the easy makings of a new horror icon. But the hokier aspects of the script come into play in the final third, as the film becomes less subversive and surprising, instead serving up one of the most obvious villain unmaskings in quite some time. There was a clear jumping off point where Heart Eyes could have totally skirted what most people were expecting of this movie, but instead it keeps going with a generic killer showdown that feels ripped straight out of the very late 90s/early 2000s slashers that it's somewhat affectionately mocking. It's still a solid movie, but also falls off hard at the end. Number 9, Companion. As feature debuts go, Companion is certainly a compelling calling card for writer-director Drew Hancock, who has since been snapped up to helm a remake of 90s horror classic The Faculty. It boasts a killer premise of a young woman coming to learn that she's a companion robot for her boyfriend, and has a ton of fun ratcheting up the tension while passing commentary on society's ever-increasing infatuation with convenience tech. Sophie Thatcher gives a superb performance in the lead role, and the script is jam-packed with wild twists and turns, not to forget some inspired kills. Yet it's also a film that doesn't really hold up to scrutiny if you think about it too much. The internal logic is flimsy at best, and characters regularly go against their own established instincts simply to get the story where it needs to go. As such, Companion feels very my first screenplay in its construction, and is a ride best enjoyed by basically just switching your brain off and taking in the gonzo mayhem. Number 8, Drop. If nothing else, Christopher Landon's Drop touted one hell of a Hitchcock for the smartphone era setup, as a widowed single mother, Violet, finds herself being terrorized by threatening airdrops while out on a date at a restaurant, which ultimately threatens her family's safety. And to Landon's credit, he has a lot of fun turning the screws in the movie's first 2 acts, continually dialing up the suspense as Violet's predicament becomes ever more dire, while audiences rack their brains trying to figure out who the nearby culprit might be. Yet despite a game performance from Megan Fahey in the lead role, Drop ultimately unfurls in its creaky clunker of a third act, as it descends into unrepentant schlock. From a predictable and underwhelming villain reveal to some extremely silly high-wire action, Drop becomes pure daft camp in the final stretch in a way that totally undermines the more stylish and composed thrills of the first hour. So close! Number 7, The Monkey. Osgood Perkins' The Monkey is mostly a banger, a darkly hilarious horror that uses a creepy cursed toy monkey to tee up a bevy of insane, Final Destination-esque death scenes. Perkins clearly relishes mining the blacker-than-black comedy from these grisly sequences, though also invests audiences in the story of identical twin protagonists Hal and Bill Shelburne. It's smooth sailing for the most part, but as with Perkins' previous horror hit Longlegs, he struggles to bring things to a satisfactory close with a third act that goes rather off the rails. For one, the climactic conflict takes an intriguing sibling rivalry and makes it needlessly convoluted. But beyond that, it also has some less than stellar CGI and a head-scratcher of a final scene that's unsurprisingly split audiences down the middle. There's so much here to savour, from the striking visuals to the deadpan comedy and Theo James's terrific two-hander in the lead roles, but the slightly limp, unassured ending leaves it feeling less than the sum of its parts. Number 6, Azrael. A post-apocalyptic horror movie that takes place in a world where nobody speaks, starring Samantha Weaving as a badass woman who is being hunted down by a cult that wants to sacrifice her? Say no more! And for much of its runtime, Azrael is a bleakly atmospheric, bloody good time, impressively mitigating its near-total lack of spoken dialogue with intense action and a typically superb performance from Weaving, whose facial expressions and overall physicality say everything that words would. Yet even with a mere 85-minute runtime, the film film runs out of steam by the end. The almost total lack of characterization and general context becomes increasingly wearisome, leading to a climax that's likely to leave audiences thinking, wait, that's it? As an experiment in cinematic form, this is definitely an interesting movie with a lot of positives, but also reaffirms just how damn difficult it is to make a sans dialogue movie truly compelling at even a short cinematic length. Number 5, Final Destination Bloodlines. Final Destination Bloodlines is unquestionably one of the stronger entries in the hit horror franchise. And for its first 2/3, it's a creative, savagely gory, hilarious, and even unexpectedly affecting romp, courtesy of the late Tony Todd's cameo. But Bloodlines seemingly used up all its best ideas ahead of the third reel, which ends up feeling like a far more conventional Final Destination movie. The film hits its peak with the gnarly demise of a certain fan-favourite character, before Stephanie, her brother Charlie, and their mother Darlene head to Iris's cabin to isolate themselves from death. The messy set piece that follows cribs a little too eagerly from the climax of Final Destination 2 without doing anything smart to iterate upon it, and the film's final rug pull will be hilariously obvious to anyone who knows much about the human body. All in all, the clunky third reel feels like it might have been the result of excess studio notes. A cobbled together shoulder shrug after an hour of some of the series' best work to date. Number 4, In a Violent Nature. On a conceptual level, In a Violent Nature was incredible. A dialogue-sparse, art house take on a classic Friday the 13th-esque slasher film, which focuses more on the masked killer than their meat sack victims. And writer-director Chris Nash deserves his plaudits for mostly delivering on that ambitious idea, serving up some genuinely gorgeous visuals alongside 2 of the most memorable death scenes in recent genre memory. But the film also begins to unfurl the longer it goes on, with the distended, bloated third act proving hugely divisive among audiences. Just when it feels like the movie is going to wrap up in snappy fashion, it limps on for another 15 minutes, with an extremely talky final sequence that, while suspenseful to a point, shifts the focus away from the villain almost entirely. Up until the climax, In a Violent Nature felt like a near-perfect revisionist take on the slasher movie, but the torpid snoozer of a final act blunted its greatness somewhat. Number 3, Your Monster. In many respects, Your Monster is one of the most underappreciated horror films of the past year. A deliriously entertaining romantic comedy horror in which a troubled woman discovers a monster living in her home who encourages her to embrace her inner rage. The film sings largely thanks to Melissa Barrera's magnetic performance in the lead role, and its amusingly macabre reworking of not only rom-coms, but also monster movies. Much like Heart Eyes, it's mating 2 tired genres and in turn creating something new. But like that film, it also feels like the creatives struggled to figure out how to end it. Your Monster's climax is by far the most divisive element of the movie, and a breaking point for many viewers, with a final revelation which forces the audience to reconsider the entire story in a different, arguably less interesting context. There's still so much to enjoy here, but the more contrived, even flimsy finale does rob the film of some of its power as a comedy, a horror, and a romance up to that point. Number 2, Don't Move. Don't Move is seemingly one of those tight, efficient gimmick thrillers that gets in, does its thing, and gets out before you can possibly lose interest. Centered around a woman who is attacked by a serial killer and injected with a paralytic agent, which will soon shut her body down, the Sam Raimi-produced movie makes good on its intriguing setup for the most part, mining enormous tension from our protagonist's fast-fading faculties and the 2 strong central performances. The problem, inevitably, is that the filmmakers evidently realised this is a tough premise to wring even just 92 minutes out of, and so in the second half of Don't Move, there's an increasing amount of wheel spinning clearly intended to pad the runtime out. The contrivances start piling up fast in order to prevent our hero from being finished off by her assailant in short order, and so it's little surprise that some were left feeling Don't Move might have worked best as a more modest 30 or 40 minute short, or even an hour-long episode of a horror anthology TV show. Still, it's well made and brilliantly acted, so there's plenty to enjoy here, even if it ends up falling shy of greatness. Number 1, Borderline. 90s nostalgia is all the rage these days, and so Borderline immediately commanded plenty of attention. A blackly comedic horror thriller in which a pop star is terrorized by an obsessive fan who believes they are to be married. Now, first things first, Ray Nicholson, yes, son of Jack, gives an outstanding performance as the central antagonist, proving himself worthy of his father's legacy with a fearlessly off-the-wall turn. As fun as it is watching him swing for the fences, though, he shares decidedly less screen time with Weaving's character than you might expect. And Weaving's character is relatively underwritten by comparison. Still, the sheer insanity of Nicholson's work, sided by a bonkers turn from Alba Baptista as his accomplice, ensures this is an anxiously energetic sit, even if it never quite delivers fully on its promise. And for a movie set in the 90s, there's a surprising lack of iconography from the decade. Just saying.